Want a lawn that looks like this, but your lawn looks a little bit more like this? Then you should click right here and check out True Green.
The Titanic was the largest ship afloat. Over 2,000 souls on that boat. Singing and dancing and having a good time except one black man they all call Shine. But he didn't mind though he was no fool. When they hit the iceberg, he played it cool. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. The captain's lady said, Shine, say for me, I'll give you more money than you could see. He said, lady, I know your words may be true, but I'm forgetting about money, so should you. He said, I'm a swim, I'm a float, I'm a hit that water like a fast-speed boat. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. A.m. on that fateful morn, Shine dived overboard and then he was gone. 20 miles on up came a shark, and on his teeth, Shine could see the spark. Shark, oh shark, he said, don't you clown. I left hundreds back there getting ready to drown. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. Now Shine must have been some kind of sea hound. As cold as it was, he didn't go down. When the news hit New York, the Titanic was sunk. Shine was on 3rd Street, quarter drunk. The waiter asked him, do you want another? He said, bring it on, man, this night was a mother. Oy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. Woy, 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 calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. Woy. The Titanic was the largest ship afloat. Over 2,000 souls on that boat. Singing and dancing and having a good time except one black man they all call Shine. But he didn't mind though he was no fool. When they hit the iceberg, he played it cool. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. The captain's lady said, Shine, say for me, I'll give you more money than you could see. He said, lady, I know your words may be true, but I'm forgetting about money, so should you. He said, I'm a swim, I'm a float, I'm a hit that water like a fast-speed boat. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, Shine dived overboard and then he was gone. 20 miles on up came a shark, and on his teeth, Shine could see the spark. Shark, oh shark, he said, don't you clown. I left hundreds back there getting ready to drown. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morn, 1912, the Titanic went down. Now Shine must have been some kind of sea hound. As cold as it was, he didn't go down. When the news hit New York, the Titanic was sunk. Shine was on third, three-quarter drunk. The waiter asked him, "Do you want another?" He said, "Bring it on, man. This night was a mother." Oi, 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 here calamity. Oi, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morning, 1912, the Titanic went down. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morning, 1912, the Titanic went down. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that fateful morning, 1912, the Titanic went down. Woy, 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 here calamity. Woy, 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 perils of the sea. 2:30 a.m. on that.
Eventually, the time traveler brings his vehicle to a stop. The machine's dials show that he has arrived in the year 802,701. What does he find? The human race has split into two species, one brutish and mean, living below ground, the Morlocks, and the other childlike and gentle, living above ground, the Eloi. Among the above ground dwellers, finds a lovely young woman named Weena, whom he befriends. He discovers to his horror that the troglodytes living below breed and harvest gentle people like cattle to eat. To make matters worse, the Morlocks manage to steal his time machine. When he finds it, he jumps aboard, and to escape the Morlocks, he pushes the lever into the extreme forward position. By the time he is able to bring the machine under control, he has moved into a far future. Mammals have become extinct, and and only some crab-like creatures and butterflies remain on Earth. He explores as far as 300 million years into the future, where he discovers a dull red sun and a lichen-like vegetation. The only animal life in evidence is a football-shaped creature with tentacles. The time traveler then returns to his own time and to his friends. As proof of his experience in the future, he produces a couple of flowers Weena had given him, of a type unknown to his friends. After talking to his friends, the time traveler departs on his time machine and never returns. One friend muses about his fate. Where did he go? Did he return to the future or go instead to some prehistoric realm? H.G. Wells' book was extraordinarily prescient in interpreting time as the fourth dimension. Einstein would use the idea in his 1905 theory of special relativity, which describes how time is measured differently by stationary and moving observers. Einstein's work, expanded by his mathematics professor Hermann Minkowski, shows that time can indeed be treated mathematically as a fourth dimension. Our universe four is thus four-dimensional. By comparison, we say that the surface of the Earth is two-dimensional because every point on Earth's surface can be specified by two coordinates, longitude and latitude. The universe, however, is four-dimensional. Locating an event in the universe requires four coordinates. This example, adapted from Russian physicist George Gamow, further illustrates the point. If I want to invite you to a party, I must give you four coordinates. I may say the party will be at 43rd Street and 3rd Avenue on the 51st floor next New Year's Eve. The first three coordinates, 43rd Street, 3rd Avenue, 51st floor, locate its position in space. Then I must tell you the time. The first two coordinates tell you where to go on the surface of Earth, and the third tells you how high to go, and the fourth tells you when to arrive. Four coordinates, four dimensions. We may visualize our four-dimensional universe by using a three-dimensional model. Figure 1 shows such a model of the solar system. The two horizontal dimensions represent two dimensions of space. For simplicity, the third dimension of space is left out. And the vertical dimension represents the dimension of time. Up is toward the future, down is toward the past. The first time I saw a model like this was in George Gamow's delightful book, 1, 2, 3, Infinity, which I read when I was about 12 years old. It changes one's perspective. Typically, textbooks present a two-dimensional diagram of the solar system. The sun is shown as a circular disk and the earth as a smaller disk near it. Earth's orbit is presented as a dashed circle on a flat page. This two-dimensional model captures only one instant of time. But suppose we had a movie of the solar system showing how the Earth orbits the sun. Each frame of the movie would be a two-dimensional picture of a solar system, a snapshot at a particular time. By cutting the film into individual frames, stacking these on top of one another, you could get a clear picture of space and time. The ascending frames show latter and later events. The time of an individual frame is given by its vertical position in the stack. The sun appears in the center of each frame as a yellow disk that does not move. Thus, within the stack, the sun becomes a vertical yellow rod, extending from the bottom of the stack to the top, showing the sun's progression from the past to the future. In each frame, Earth is a small blue dot, and in each ascending frame, it is a farther along on its orbit. So in the stack, Earth becomes a blue helix winding around a yellow rod on the center. The radius of the helix is equal to the radius of Earth's orbit, 93 million miles, or as we astronomers like to say, 8 light minutes, because it takes light traveling at 186,000 miles per second, about 8 minutes across that distance. The distance of in time for a helix to complete its turn, of course, is 1 year. The helix is Earth's world line, its path through space time. If we were to think four dimensionally, we would see that Earth is not just a sphere, it is really a helix, a long piece of spaghetti spiraling through the sun's world line through time. As the time traveler said, all real objects have four dimensions: width, breadth, height, and duration. Real objects have an extension in time. Your dimensions are perhaps 6 feet tall, 1 foot thick, 2 feet wide, and 80 years in duration. You have a world line too. Your world line starts with your birth, snakes through space and forwards in time, threading through all the events of your life, and ends at your death. A time traveler who visits the past is just someone whose world line somehow loops back in time, where it could even intersect itself. This would allow the time traveler to shake hands with himself. The older man could meet up with his younger self and say, "Hi, I'm your future self. I've traveled back in time to say hello." The surprised younger man could reply, "Really?" He would then continue his life, becoming old and eventually looping back to that same event, where he would recognize his younger self, shake hands, and say, "Hi, I'm your future self. I've traveled back in time to say hello." Timescape in the many worlds theory. First, the radical alternative. It involves quantum mechanics, that field of physics developed in the early 20th century to explain the behavior of atoms and molecules. Quantum mechanics show how particles have a wave nature and waves have a particle nature, a key feature in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which tells us that we cannot establish a particle's position and velocity with arbitrary accuracy. Such quantum fuzziness, although usually negligible in the macroscopic world, is important on atomic scales. Quantum mechanics explain how atoms emit or absorb light at a specific wavelength when electrons jump from one energy level to another. The wave nature of particles lead to unusual effects such as quantum tunneling, in which a helium nucleus may suddenly jump out of a uranium nucleus, causing its radioactive decay. Solving quantum wave equations allows you to predict the probability of finding a particle at various places. This in turn leads, in one interpretation, to the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics, which posits different parallel worlds where the particle is detected at those various places. Many physicists think this interpretation is an unnecessary addition to the theory, but a number of physicists working on the frontiers of our understanding of quantum theory do take this many worlds interpretation and its refinements and extensions seriously. Seriously? In this picture, the universe contains not one single world history, but many in parallel. Experience one world history as we do, like riding a train down a track from the past to the future. As passengers on a train, we see events go by like stations along a track. Erasing race theory. There goes the Roman Empire. There goes World War II. And look, people are landing on the moon. But the universe might be like a giant switching yard with many such railroad tracks interlaced. Next to our track is one on which the World War II never happened. A train is constantly encountering switches at which it may take either of two lines. Before World War II, there may have been a day when Hitler could have been killed, diverting the train onto a track on which World War II did not occur. According to the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics, a branch in the tracks occurs every time an observation is recorded or a decision is made. It doesn't have to be a human observation or decision. Even an electron in an atom making a change from one energy level to another could cause a branching of the track. In this scenario, an Oxford University physicist, David Deutsch, view a time traveler may go back in time and kill his grandmother when she was a young girl. That will cause the universe to branch onto a different track that contains a time traveler and a dead grandmother. The universe in which the grandmother lived and gave birth to the mother, who in turn gave birth to the time traveler, the universe we remember seeing, still exists. For it is from that universe, that track, that the time traveler came. The time traveler just moves to a different universe where he will participate in a changed history. These ideas are illustrated well by Gregory Benford's 1980 Nebula Award winning sci fi novel Timescape. The story is set in 1998. Its hero uses a beam of tachyons, hypothetical particles that move faster than light, to send a signal to 1963, warning scientists of an ecological disaster that will engulf the world in 1998. This novel came to my attention because a 1974 paper of mine appears in it. The hero reads my paper during an airplane trip in 1998, which gives him an important clue for making his tachyon transmit. As Benford puts it, he rummaged through his briefcase for a paper by Gott that Kathy had given him. Here, a time symmetric matter and antimatter tachyon cosmology. Quite a piece of territory to bite off indeed, but Gott's solution were there, luminous on the page. Would that all my research papers shone so brightly? The warning is received in the fall of 1963, and the scientists begin to act on it. They know about the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics, and their publications and warnings about the ecological disaster help subvert it by sending the universe on track on which the disaster is avoided. Incidentally, in a parallel universe, President Kennedy is only wounded in Dallas rather than killed. Of course, this is just a work of fiction, or is it? Maybe there is some parallel universe in which everything happened just as the book describes it. Why would some people believe that an infinite number of parallel universes exist, playing out all possible world histories, despite the fact that we ourselves actually observe only one world history? The celebrated California Institute of Technology, Caltech, physicist Richard Feynman showed that in general, if one wished to calculate the probability of a certain outcome, one had to consider all possible world histories that could lead up to it. So perhaps all the world histories are real. To someone hoping to find a time machine in order to go to the past to save a lost loved one, the most comforting thing I can say is that, as far as we understand today, this can only be accomplished if the many worlds theories of quantum mechanics is true. And if that is true, then there is already a parallel universe in which your loved one is okay now. That's because all possible universes exist. Unfortunately, you are just in the wrong one. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in Self-Consistency. Now for the more conservative approach to the grandmother paradox. Time travelers don't change the past because they were always a part of it. The universe we observe is four-dimensional, with world lines snaking through it. If some of these world lines can bend back and cross through the same event twice, then so be it. The travel could then shake hands with the earlier version of himself. The solution has to be self-consistent. Ooh, consistency. The solution has to be self-consistent. However, the principle of self-consistency has been advanced by physicist Igor Novkov of University of Copenhagen, Kip Thorne of Caltech, and their collaborators. In this case, the time traveler may have tea with his grandmother while she is a young girl, but he can't kill her, or he would be not be born. And we already know he was. If you witness a previous event, it must play out just as before. Think of rewatching the classic movie Casablanca. You know how it is going to turn out. No matter how many times you see it, Ingrid Bergman always gets on that plane. The time traveler's view of the scene would be similar. She might know from studying history how it is going to turn out, but she would be unable to change it. If she went back in time and booked passage on the Titanic, she would not be able to convince the captain that the icebergs were dangerous. Why? Because we already know what happened and it cannot be changed. If any time travelers were aboard, they certainly failed to get the captain to stop. And the names of those travelers would have to be on the list of passengers you can read today. Self consistency seems contrary to this common sense notion of free will. Though we seem to experience free will to be able to do what we please, the time traveler seems constrained. This seems to rob the time travel of essential human ability. But consider this: free will never did allow one to do something logically impossible, an important point made by Princeton philosopher David Lewis. In analyzing time travel paradoxes, I might wish right now to instantly become a tomato larger than the whole universe. But no matter how hard I try, I cannot do it. Killing your grandmother as a young girl during a time travel expedition may be a similarly impossible task. If you think of the universe as one four-dimensional entity with world lines winding through it like so many garden hoses, it is clear why. This four-dimensional entity does not change. It is like an intricate fixed sculpture. If you want to know what it is like to experience living in that universe, you must look along the world line of particular person from beginning to end. Many science fiction time travel stories have explored the concept of self-consistent world history. The charming 1989 movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure has a lot of fun with an idea. Bill and Ted are two high school boys hoping to form a rock band. Unfortunately, they are failing history. And if they don't pass, Ted will be sent to military school in Alaska, splitting up their band. Their only hope is to get an A plus in their upcoming history presentation, but they are clueless about what to do.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter Goddard, Director of the Institute for Advanced Study. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon to this public lecture. After the lecture, there'll be a reception to which you're all invited in the Ford Hall Common Room. Today, our speaker is Charles Simonyi. He is President, CEO, and indeed founder of Intentional Software Corporation. Dr. Simonyi has been chair of the Board of Trustees of the Institute since October 2008 and a trustee since 1997. Dr. Simonyi was born in Budapest, and his early interests included computers and space exploration. In 1966, when he was about 18 years old, he went to work in a computer company in Denmark, moving in 1968 to Berkeley in California to take his bachelor's degree, and then on to Stanford for graduate study in computer science, obtaining his doctorate in 1977. In the meantime, he had been recruited to work at Xerox PARC, where he developed the first WYSIWYG, that is what you see is what you get, document production system. In 1981, he joined Microsoft, where he led the development of the programs nearly all of us use all the time, like Microsoft Word and Excel, for example. Charles Simonyi has been an outstanding supporter of the Institute and a great believer in its mission. He has a deep interest in and a remarkable understanding of the whole range of the Institute's activities. As a benefactor, he has made donations to support the work of the Institute that are unequaled since the founding of the Institute. In addition to all this and much else, Charles has been in space twice, the only civilian to do so. And I have now much pleasure in inviting him to share with us his experiences in fulfilling one of his life's ambitions, not once, but twice. Charles.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you. You're very, very generous. And I'm so happy to be here. This is the second time that I have the privilege of appearing here and talk about space, now with the second space flight under my belt and with more data. May I ask who was here for the first talk 2 years ago? I see a lot of hands. Fortunately, at that talk, I was focusing more on the training process, and a metaphor that I use for training is that it's like a very, very long sentence of words, the end of which is punctuated by an exclamation point. And literally, it's the rocket that stands there, and figuratively, it's the mission. So at this time, I want to more focus on the flight itself, and I think that even for that. There's so little time. To create a framework for it, I will discuss the mission profile of what really happens in a mission, what are the elements of the mission, the insertion into the orbit, the rendezvous, the different phases of flight, insertion into orbit, the rendezvous with the space station, then the joint flight with the space station that goes for 12 more days, and then the return to Earth. And following this, now that you will have some framework to plug your experiences into, I will choose a particular aspect of spaceflight. And indeed, whatever aspect we would choose, it would take hours to describe it to the detail that is still interesting. You know, how do you sleep in space? What's weightlessness like? How do you eat? What is the science that is going on, and so on and so forth. But for this talk, I chose a very specific aspect that is seldom discussed, but everybody's interested in, especially the kids that are so many are here, and so glad to see them. It's the toilet, the disposal of solid and liquid waste, and in that discussion we are helped by a little exhibit that is right outside of the door, which is one of the toilets that we are going to discuss in detail. So I invite you to look at the exhibit afterwards, and at that time you will understand what all those strange contraptions are for. So with that, let's look at the mission profile. Of course, the purpose of the mission is to, and I'm talking now about a Soyuz mission where space tourists can take part. The purpose of that mission is to relieve 2 crew members on the space station. They have been up there for 6 months, and now it's time for them to come back, and 2 new crew members will go up. You also have to relieve the spacecraft itself. The spacecraft that we'll be studying serves as the lifeboat on the space station. If anything were to happen on the space station, the only way to escape the space station is on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Now, of course, if a space shuttle goes up, during the time the space shuttle is up there, the space shuttle serves as its own lifeboat. But if the space shuttle leaves any American astronaut on the station, then that astronaut is dependent on the Soyuz in case of an emergency. That means that astronaut has to be trained for the Soyuz. That astronaut has to have a Soyuz spacesuit, for example, and other personal equipment that are necessary, for example, a seat liner. So many American astronauts fly up on the shuttle in their American spacesuits, and in their suitcase they carry a Russian spacesuit that they will need up there. And I trained with a lot of Americans in Russia. And they are just really the cream of the crop. They learn Russian, which is a very, very difficult language. They speak it excellent, and we'll see some examples of that because I have 2 videos. And it's out of the 4 flights on the Soyuz, I went up twice, and then I came down, of course, with a different crew. Well, I mentioned that we are relieving 2 people on the space station. That means this is a 3-person spacecraft, so there is an extra seat on the spacecraft. That's called the taxi seat. And that's the taxi seat that is sold on the open market to civilians, and which is a kind of a very clever way of raising money to support the otherwise pretty much financially strapped Russian space program. So, okay, with that, let's. This is the exclamation point. The rocket is called Soyuz because it's eponymous with the spacecraft. It became a brand. The interesting thing, the spacecraft is the purple thing on the top. Those three little purple balls. We'll see that in a minute in detail. The interesting thing about this rocket, it's very, very old technology. Sputnik in 1957 October was launched on essentially the same rocket. It was called the R7 at the time. And the upper part of the rocket, the upper stages as it's called, they were different, but the major part of it and the technology as a whole was the same. The launching pad was the same. Gagarin, first man in space, first person in space, was launched essentially on the same rocket and on exactly the same pad. When you walk on that pad with the crumbling concrete under your feet, that's a historical place that is still in service, and it's going to be serviced because now with the space shuttle retiring, the rest of the seats that used to be called taxi seats are now bought up by the United States for American astronauts to visit the space station. What I wanted to mention last time is that on the 4 flights that I took part in on the Soyuz, 3 of them, the other person, apart from the commander, was an American. So I was flying with 3 American astronauts out of the 4 flights, and they were doing the duties of the flight engineer. They were speaking Russian during the performance of their duties, and they did a fantastic job. So this is the launch of the Soyuz. It's the interesting thing about this picture is that it's taken by my brother, so you can actually get very close to it, and it's very, very safe and very old, very reliable system. Interesting picture of the insertion into orbit, the different events that happen during the 8 minutes that you get to the orbit. As you see, the rocket basically sheds various parts as time goes on. You are launched. You shed the escape rocket on the top. Then you shed the 4 rockets on the side. Then you shed the launch shroud that envelopes the spacecraft at number 4. Number 5 is the shut-off of the second stage, and number 6, the second. Let's see, 1, 2. The second stage drops off, and then we drop some shrouds on the back of the third stage, and finally the third stage and the spacecraft separates. And these impact points are downrange between 100 miles and 1,000 miles of the launching sites, and there are nomadic people who then scavenge the magnesium and aluminum that can be recovered, just like in Star Wars. This is how it feels. People always ask, how does it feel, the launch? And this is the same 8 minutes in seconds, and it shows the acceleration that I feel. Actually, this is a training graph. The actual graph moves a little bit more and can go down to 0 Gs as well for short moments at the separation of stages. But as you see, just at the moment of start, and indeed up to about 15 seconds after the start, there's practically no acceleration. I thought it was like going into a sports car and being in first gear. That was about the effect. And even for the longest time, you don't reach 2 Gs, which is again something that a pilot, for example, in a normal aircraft could experience in a 60-degree bank, and then so on. For a short period of time, you go up to 3.5 Gs. It's not that hard. You learn how to breathe, and it's actually doesn't restrict you in any way. So here's the spacecraft, the Soyuz spacecraft. Just want you to remember that it consists of 3 parts. The bottom part is unpressurized, and it contains all the equipment that doesn't need to be protected. The middle part is the one that will eventually return to Earth. Now that one, when you see how crowded the spacecraft is, it's always the middle part that is shown. Indeed, during the dynamic phases of the flight, when we have to wear the spacesuit, in case there would be a depressurization, we are occupying the middle part, and indeed it's very crowded there. But then there is the what I call the living room, and we lose translation from the Russian. The living room is a very nice spherical volume that is occupied during the 2 days when we are doing the rendezvous with the space station. So the 2 rooms with the 3 people, it's very, very comfortable. And in particular, since we are going to be talking about the toilet is in the living room. So that you have perfect privacy, for example, and also if you think in terms of the engineering genius behind it, is that anything that is not necessary for the reentry is put into this disposable object, the living room, and we'll see more what else the living room is used for. So here's how that spacecraft looks just before the launching. You see the 3 sections very clearly there. And this is one of my crews. Mike Barrett, the American, is on the right, and the commander, Gennady Pedalka, his 3rd flight. In this one, this is my 2nd flight, the commander's 3rd flight, and it's Mike's 1st flight. We are very wet and tired because on the ground, the spacesuit is heavy, and there is no cooling, except the spacecraft is not powered yet. So we are not cooled adequately. Right now we are cooled outside of the spacecraft with those hoses that attach to the spacesuit and pump in air. But you can see that we look pretty sweaty after the exercise. This is what happens this is how rendezvous happens. The outer circle, the red circle, is where the space station is, and then the other circle here is how do you catch up with it very, very slowly. Even though the 2 objects are moving at orbital velocity, which is 8 kilometers, but 5 miles a second, the distance between them doesn't change by that much. In fact, this number here, forget about the dot, that should really be there, it's 12 meters per second. The speed, which is about 10 meters per second, so 25 miles an hour. So the interesting thing is that the spacecraft wouldn't really break the speed limit even in town. So it's only that's how gradually you are approaching the space station. Of course, at the last, when you get really close and just before you actually capture the capture locks, you are going at a few inches per second. Of course, there's a lot of science involved in this, but it's not all done on computers. This is the little black book of one of the engineers who has been there for 50 years, and his book includes all the data about all the different launches and what were the errors and what could be improved, and it's just an incredible fount of information, all handwritten. The nice thing about handwritten is that it's always backward compatible. As your equipment is upgraded, you can still read your old notes. Now, once we arrive to the space station, what is the space station? And this is this was the space station when I first saw it, but it's still pretty big. Please note that it's more than twice the volume, the interior volume of a 757. So indeed, it's very spacious. The way I talk about it is that it's like really 3 school buses, one after the other. We are going. This is forward. So this is the direction of flight, if you will. It's always parallel to the Earth's surface, and it's kept that way, which actually means that it's turning all the time, if you think about it. And you can feel that very gradual turning. In 90 minutes, as it orbits the Earth, it will turn through 360 degrees. So this is the Russian part, and this is the cargo part, also built by the Russians, and this is called the American segment, and this is the port where the space shuttle comes in. At this point, we have one Soyuz that is docked right here, and there's another Soyuz that is docked right here. On my 2 flights, once we docked here and once we docked there. So today, the space station has been built up, and there will be also, I think, one more addition. But as you see, the Russian segments are still the same. This is the American segment. This is the European portion and the Japanese portion over there. And then the pink one was added just the last time with the cupola, where you can observe the sky and the Earth. The feel for the space station is a little bit like a submarine. And in particular, this illustration came from a manual that shows what happens when a leak occurs. What do you have to do? And of course, what you have to do is the same as in a submarine. The submarine, of course, the water comes in. Here, the air goes out. But the problem is the same. You have to close the hatches, and by closing the hatches, you isolate the different volumes and you determine where the leak happens. And those are all the hatches that you would close in a particular order to determine, essentially doing a binary search in technical language of where it happens, where the leak is. The volume is enormous, and the leak typically would be very small. So it's expected that depressurization of the station would take tens of minutes, and during that time it can be easily isolated. The compartment can be easily isolated, and there's no great danger. In fact, the Russian Mir station has depressurized due to an accident where a spacecraft hit it physically and caused a leak. Now this is the last phase of the flight that we haven't mentioned, the return from space. And I want you to focus on this, especially because I'm going to now show you a video, probably the first video taken in a Soyuz from how it looks and how it feels to come back from space. And we will go through all of these important events on the video. The video is a little bit compressed, of course, because it's almost 2-hour process, what you see up here. But the important parts are there. So the first event on the upper left corner is the deorbit burn. The small engine is fired. You are trying to slow down the spacecraft by 115.2 meters per second, which is actually a nice speed. It's a couple of 100 miles an hour. But remember that we are doing 8 kilometers a second, and only 100 meters per second change in those 8 kilometers per second is enough to change your orbit in such a way that your orbit will not intercept the surface of the Earth. So at that point, you are going to come back one way or another, because your orbit, you are no longer in an orbit that is outside of the solid part of the Earth. So the next important event, it would be the third one, is the separation of the 3 compartments. It's a very important moment. We will see it, and it's all done with explosives. There's a big bang, and the explosives separate, cut the metal, and separate the compartments. The 2 unprotected compartments the left one is, of course, the living room, and the other one is the instrument compartment that will burn up in the atmosphere. Why is that important? Because at this point, the living room is full of garbage. We will later see how the garbage is disposed of, and we dispose of it by putting it into the living room so that it will burn up at that stage. The middle part is protected. At that point, we are now surrounded by plasma. Because of just the friction of the air, we are going at 8 kilometers a second. Another interesting thing is that before we reach the upper limits of the atmosphere, there's practically no deceleration, but we are flying lower and lower. And as you are flying with the same speed at a lower altitude, it's a little bit like on a car, whether you are on a very wide freeway, you don't have a sense of speed. But if you are in a narrow alley going at the same speed, then, that looks really hairy. And it's the same thing here. We are now flying lower and lower with orbital speeds, and you can just see things whizzing by, and you realize that you are going really fast, as opposed to up there, everything is very stately, everything is, kind of apparently slow, if you will. So then we slow down to about 170 meters per second, a series of 3 parachutes open. And then the next important point is here, around 6 kilometer altitude, when the heat shield is jettisoned. And at that point also the window will have burnt up by this time. The window has several panes, and the outer burnt up pane of the window is jerked off by the ejection of the heat shield. That is necessary to expose the so-called soft landing rockets, which then will, at the last stage, will fire at an altitude of 80 centimeters. This is the altitude. You're going at 10 meters a second at that point, and that's on your main parachutes. They are at 1,000 square feet. 1,000 square meters, 10,000 square feet of parachute, single parachute. There is a backup parachute in case the main parachute were to fail. And the altitude is determined by a so-called gamma ray backscatter altimeter. So the interesting thing about it is that the backside of the spacecraft is highly radioactive. So you will see, well, in fact, let's just see what's going on. We get our flight plan, if you will. This is where we are going to land. You can see the Caspian Sea, and then the landing site, the designated landing site where the rescue people are waiting in Kazakhstan. And you can see where the separation occurs over Egypt, and then the fire starts basically at the next stage, and then you land. Here I am ready to come back. There's a lot of water that we need to dehydrate ourselves. We are taking salt tablets and drink water on regular schedule because the space removes a lot of fluids from your body. It's a little bit like with the medical procedures. You need to rehydrate before you come back to Earth. So we have a schedule for that. So I'm in charge of holding on to parachute. You can see where the separation occurs over Egypt, and then the
rage of evil, the devil and his host, whatever name we want to use for him, whether it's in a religious content or a non-religious or pagan, whatever you want to say, the devil is on a rampage. He is running out of time. The two, you can't see it tonight, but the planets are already aligning. 4 of them are already lined up. This, they said, was not true. Also, scientists said the planet Earth is hollow. We downloaded it to everybody got it, who got it on their computers, right? They're saying the planet is hollow. It's not hot molten lava in the center. Sounds familiar to me. TLC for this whole week had verification UFOs, right? And the man who was the right-hand man of President Eisenhower came forth and publicly announced, and he showed pictures. I got the thing, right? And so he started showing film, I'm gonna put it up here. He came forth, and they showed him with President Eisenhower. He said, yes, we are living in a time where UFOs do exist. He was there at Roswell, he said. He looked in the box, he said, Gray's in there. They told the story on that same program about how the extraterrestrials were here making a deal with Eisenhower and them, right? And gave them technology. Talks about the laser, the mini disc, and certain medical cures. They have it all on this tape. So I ordered the tape, so I'm gonna put it on for y'all so we get it in. Right? You follow? And then when they decided to leave, the government said, we want y'all to give us the technology on your crafts. And this was Truman. And they told him no. Truman first, and then Eisenhower after, I'm sorry. They told him no, we won't give it to you. You know what they did? Shot the craft down. Craft bounced down in Roswell, New Mexico. And then picked up and tried to take off and then crashed again about 60 miles away. This is what the man says. Now you go back and read our book, From Man from Planet Risk, and you see the exact same story. He said certain students came around and saw on the floor 4 dead Grays, one badly wounded, and one walking around dazed, asking for help but without talking. Now this is Dwight David Eisenhower's right-hand man saying, you know what he said? All I want, because he's old now, he's old and in the sea in creation, right? So he don't care no more, they can't do nothing to him. He said, all I want the government to do is be fair and tell the people the truth. Let them know we are in contact with UFOs. There are Grays here. He said, that's all I want. These lies have to stop. Now, anybody who wants to remember, the only mentality that must fight reality is faith, belief, and theory. And that's the foundation for religion. So people on the religious tip got to make like this is not true, because if you say, show me the Grays in your Bible, they can't. And it makes them look stupid for believing a certain philosophy their whole life, because they have no proof of it. You know what I'm saying? But now they have come to the conclusion. They just showed, I'm telling you, they had this thing, it would come on at 9 and stayed on to 11. How many hours? Huh? For a whole week. They showed stuff that you haven't seen before. They went back to everything in UFOs, and they showed you all the things that were not confirmed, all the things the government couldn't right away. Oh, they also said, yes, the Majestic 12 did exist. It was not a mythological organization. He said there was 6 civilians and 6 top security. Yes, he said also that the Project Blue Book does still continue. Yes, there was a Montauk Project. Yes, there was a Philadelphia experiment. They're pulling the cover off this, but this year is supposed to happen. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, they're over in Egypt, like I told you they would, opening up the tombs. How long ago does that tell you? This year, 1999, they got to get prepared for what? The Order of the Owls. They also showed on television the obelisk in Washington. They have lit it up. We renovated it. They built a new, what they call Pylon Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? They're getting ready to declare America Egypt. Oh, yes. And people don't even know what's going on. The sacred societies are moving, and they are amazed at you. They're trying to figure out how you knew all this. Because everything we told them to expect is happening. That alignment that you see is why they're telling you tomorrow is going to be sunny, and when you get up, it's raining. Because they have no way of knowing. It's why all of those poor innocent skiers, by the thousands, died this year. Did you know that? Because of ice and avalanches, because the news reporters could not properly forecast. They went up there and people got covered, towns of people. That's why right now Boston is catching hell, high peak. Seattle is catching hell, high peak. And you know what happens after high freezes at the wrong part of temperature? They call them cracks in the earth start, shift start. So you can expect another earthquake near California or along the Andrea Fault again. You know what happens also? They're talking about the price of milk dropping. Now, why would the price of milk drop if cows got a disease? Think about it now. Why would the price of milk drop if cows have a disease? Also, the doctors have proved that milk does not help the bones. They grew. This is ugly too. You got this on film too. They grew a nose on a man's forehead. You saw it? Oh, I thought I'm glad I'm not alone. Because I know I be saying some crazy stuff. I'm the craziest guy on the planet. I be saying stuff, you like, that nigga nuts. I'm saying, they out of the film, they grew a man's nose up here because this fool went out and froze his nose off. He came back, his nose was black. It was froze. They had to grow it. They grew it on his forehead, then moved it down. Hello. Step back. But what does that say to us? It says that our doctrine that we once could grow our own limbs is true. And as crazy as it sounds when I told y'all, keloiding is a sign that we used to grow our own limbs. That nigga crazy. Now, is it all right because he said it? Is it all right now that he's talking about the alignment of the planets? Is it all right now that he wants, I wish I had a blackboard. I would show y'all the reason why I never bother with, Kate, what do you call it? The Millennium Bug? Y2K. I will show you how simple a mistake is. It's simple as heck. Right? And I'll try to explain it. It's going to be difficult. But it's going to be difficult to understand without a blackboard. But I'm going to try, okay? You have to use your imagination. So you're going to see how simple the mistake is and why they can't rectify it. And that's the funny part about it. There it is. Right? I was watching to see how. Now, you remember in Man from Planet Riz, how I spoke about Von Neumann being assigned to build a computer in 1940. He wasn't able to do it. It took 3 years. They needed Tesla, the guy from Florida who built the Coral Castle. I guess they leaked scouted. They put together the best minds they could. I think somebody fell out on them. You gotta act like they didn't lose any points. Just make like they didn't have it. But they put the best minds together to build this computer. And when they did, this computer was the size of a whole room. Right? All right, now look at this here. This ain't the real deal. But of course, like everything else, you find out what Pops is telling you is true. Especially y'all in there, especially y'all are saying that nigga crazy. These are 4. The original computers only had 4 places to work with. If you go back and remember your original calculators, the screen only had, it came up about that big, and it was green. You got me? All right. These are considered windows. Now, behind these windows, you got this. A 1, a 0, a 1, and those are the figures that could fall within that framework. And then those are multiplications of binary math by which they program computers. Do you understand what I mean? All right. Now watch what happens when they have to create a number in this here screen. I'm not saying they don't have them this long now. I'm saying the original configuration of the computer back in 1943 only had 4 digits it can work with. You got that? And they shape the numbers inside these boxes. Pick a number. 8. 8 would have to be here, here, and there. You understand that? Sometimes it would break in the middle like this. Have a small break in at the corner. You ever seen that inside of a computer? What do you call it? Analog numbers. Thank you. So now, when you only have 4 of these boxes, you're allowed to go from, you can go to 1999. Because the number 1 can only come up on this side. Because if it comes up on this side, it interferes with the next number. You with me? So if this number was, let's say 9, that would be the 9, you got it? See that? If the 1 was over here, what would happen? You wouldn't be able to tell it was a 9 or an 8. You Got it. So number one can either appear here or there. So now how do you write 2,000 when if you squeeze these together, you lose all these digits and this will become 6? Because you need the 1 over here. And then you can put the 9 there. And you can put the 9 there. And the 9 there. So you can get 1, 9, 9, 9. But if you go for 2, you got that? 2, what happens over here? Okay. 2, 2, what happens over here? This number 1 can't go in this end, would have to go here. Because you'd be occupying the same space. Because their computers can't move the 1 without altering the first 2 numbers, it makes it impossible for the computers. So they'll go back, all the way back around to 19,1999. You follow what I'm saying? As far as, or they can go to 1000. But they can't do 2 without this changing into a 6, which will give them in the year 2000, the year 6,000, mathematically. And that would confuse the computer, you follow? Jam the system, and the mark of the beast would be confirmed. You see, they get the year 2000 by calculating from the Gregorian calendar that they created of Jesus. Jesus being 2,000 years ago, we're 1,999 years from that. From the year 2000, we add one more year, you get 2,000. But if Jesus was back 4,000 years ago, which was their Jesus canon, when you bring it up, it'll come down to 4,000 and 2,000, which would be, and that will jam the computers. The computers were not designed to create that. Nowadays, they have these things way out like this, and they got figures like that. But the computers don't have the configuration. Inside them, the binary figures only do 4 digits. It's either 0, 1, 0, 1, or 0, or 1, 1, 1, 0, or it can only do 4 figures. You know what I'm saying? They can't even do 1, 1, 1, 1 without throwing the computer off. Did I lose you? Thank you. With that in mind, right? It's simple. It's real simple. They just don't want to tell anybody. I just want to see how long they can play this game. With that in mind, they're up against some very serious problems. Either they have to get back inside their computers and reprogram the computers, set up a whole new system. You follow that? That means that they have to hire people to sit down by hand, manually, and sit in and just do all the new bank cards with everybody's name. This is what they're saying will cost billions of dollars. Now, if you don't believe me, as usual, I'm going to tell you, go check it out. You'll find out that any bank or any large corporation is trying to so-called prepare for this event is doing no more than hiring manual laborers to go inside and sit down and retype all their cards to give it with a new computer that now does have the ability to use 8 figures, move from 4 screens to 8. And that's why now if you look at some of your calculators and ad machines, you see 8 screens. They're long, they're all the way across like this. But that does not protect them against what they have been doing since 1940. That's all the things that we live by, the navigation, the air, everything that we've been following is under the 4 digits. They never even considered the world getting to the year 2000. They was making the computer specifically to alter matter so that they can use Einstein's formula. And they couldn't use his formula because people couldn't do the equation 9 to the 9th power of 9. It's a mathematical equation that becomes infinite because if any individual was to sit down and figure it out, if they wrote one number per second, they still would never be able to finish writing out the answer. It's like when you write down pi, 3.14. That's a round off figure. If you start adding all the figures to pi goes up to about 1,000 digits. But because it keeps breaking into percentages of itself. And so when you get MC squared, energy times mass speed of light, Einstein's so-called theory, which became a fact, relativity, it became relevant, really, right? You're coming up with formulas that no man could do in his head. So they had to create a Superman. And the Superman they created was the first computer, IBM. And they called him Hal. That's right. They called him Hal because the numbers in the computer are Arabic numbers. And the word Hal in Arabic means can you, or did you, or do you. You follow what I'm saying? In the movie 2001, Space, the computer's name was Hal. When you look at the letters Hal, if everybody remembers, you get the word IBM. You understand that? That's the problem. Forget about Intel and all the new names they got. The original computer that's in Brussels, Belgium, is called HAL 6000 or HAL 666. They only calculated for the 666 because the year, next year, is the 6,000th year and the end of the 3-6 rule, which were really Hebrew letters, Zain, 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 or Zeta, Zeta, Zeta. And the beings that influenced them were the beings from Zeta Reticuli, reptilians, who wore a dragon as a symbol, and the dragon's name there was Tanine, found in your Bible as the whale in Genesis, found in your Bible as the devil, but not as the serpent. The serpent is another whole character. You know what I'm saying? All of this may start to sound like mumbo jumbo to you, but all of this is calculated when it says herein. That's right. The number of a man. Remember that? And his number is 666. That book called Apocrypha, which means to reveal things, the revelation, was not a part of the Bible. And here's how you know. Because the Nicene Council came together, and out of thousands of books written by poets and philosophers and plays and poems of that time, they chose 3 books, right? Synoptic, they called them. And that was Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then they needed a commentary of support for someone who could say, I was with Jesus, to confirm it. So they added in the 4th book, John. So you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those were the books of the New Testimony. You follow that? The Revelation was added after. The Revelation is a what? A catastrophe book, a calamity book. You follow that? The Revelation predicts events that have nothing to do with Christianity or Judaism. Because the book of Revelations speaks about a war. You remember? It says a war in heaven where Satan and his angels fought against Michael and his angels. But wait a minute now, work with me. But it ends by saying in the book of Revelation, revealed in the year 96, that there was found no more place for Satan in heaven. Is that correct? But then we come to the book of Job, and it says the angels are going to heaven before God, and Satan is with them. When the war in heaven was supposed to have taken place a long time ago, before the creation of this earth, and Satan was not allowed back in heaven no more. But in Job, Satan gets back in heaven. Is this a second Satan? Is this a confession that there's more than one Satan? You follow what I'm saying? In the book of John, first apostle John, a letter that he wrote to his girlfriend and her sons, he speaks about the Antichrist. And he says, they are with us right now. The Antichrist is usually depicted as the devil. In modern day Christianity, we are being taught that the Antichrist is an individual. But if you go back and read 1 John, you find that the Antichrist is a group of beings that was living during the year 96 AD. Is another one. Jesus, we talked about this in office the other day. Jesus was called Jesus according to the Bible because he was to save his people. That's what the word Jesus means. He said he called his name Jesus because he was to save his people. Correct? However, Jesus didn't save his people. The Jesus of 2,000 years ago, his people are still not saved Christians. They're still suffering. They were burnt on stakes, hung, decapitated. They was put in cages with lions, even. Wasn't they? According to their own history. So then, if his name was called Jesus by the Holy Ghost, because he was to save his people, if he didn't save his people, then that wasn't the Holy Ghost. Because the Holy Ghost would be bringing a message from God, and God don't make mistakes. You with me? So we're looking at a day and time where what we thought was God is coming out to be the devil. And what we thought was the devil was a God suppressed. Where realities are clashing. I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. Where we were told, for instance, that Jezebel was a wicked woman. Correct? And so the Israelites threw her out the window because God commanded them to. And left her body to lay in the streets, and the dogs ate her flesh. Correct? And we was taught to believe this is something God wanted done. Right? But men did it. But men actually threw her out the window. God wanted Christ crucified, but men did it. God wanted the walls of Jericho to fall, but men did it. You hear me? You see where I'm going? Mass deception. The reason why the world is in such a bad state is because those of us who thought all our lives we were worshiping God and giving the power and the glory to God was giving the power and the glory to Satan. Jezebel was a wicked woman. Correct? And so the Israelites threw her out the window because God commanded them to. And left her body to lay in the streets, and the dogs ate her flesh. Correct? And we was taught to believe this is something God wanted done. Right? But men did it. But men actually threw her out the window. God wanted Christ crucified, but men did it. God wanted the walls of Jericho to fall, but men did it. You hear me? You see where I'm going? Mass deception. The reason why the world is in such a bad state is because those of us who thought all our lives we were worshiping God and giving the power and the glory to God, was giving the power and the glory to Satan. He's the killer. He's the one that promises you hell. Let me tell you why. Because Jesus made a statement. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Right? When you see me, you see the Father. And then he said, and as I am, you shall be also. Correct? He said, you will become the Father. As I am, you shall be also. I am in the Father is in me. You are to transform yourself into God's. This is what he's saying. Because he transformed himself into a God as the Son of God. You with me? Because if he's the Son of God, then he's a baby God. And when he grows to manhood, he becomes a full-fledged God. And he turned to you and said, as I am, you shall be also. I am in the Father is in me. You are to transform yourself into God's. This is what he's saying. Because he transformed himself into a God as the Son of God. You with me? Because if he's the Son of God, then he's a baby God. And when he grows to manhood, he becomes a full-fledged God. He